Good morning from a chilly autumn morning in Blackburn, Victoria this morning here at the Avenue Uniting Church. My name's Rod and I'm the minister here. We meet on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nations. My witness to the word this morning comes from or is relating to John's Gospel and the image that, one of the images that he shares as a way of Jesus describing himself. And it comes from chapter 15. And I read from the Gospel. I am the true vine, says Jesus, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You've already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered and thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Remain in my love. Now, I like a nice glass of red wine every now and again, but that's not why I like this image, the vine. I love it because it's one of those maddening things that John's Gospel has Jesus saying about himself. Instead of giving straight answers or questions or clear signals about who he was, who he is. It's a good reminder that the Gospels aren't simply biographies or outlines or histories of the people and events in Jesus' life. They're stories told and created for a purpose, with their stories to persuade people to hear about the identity and the purpose of Jesus. In the fourth Gospel, John, the signs and wonders are clearly there to identify Jesus with the God of Israel, and the writer makes that explicit connection late in the Gospel. But at the same time, it's done in a very creative and literary way, an imaginative way, and it calls its readers then and now to engage with Jesus in a way that's quite different from the way of the other three Gospels that we have in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark and Luke. And the I am statements, of which this is one, are a really good example of this. And there's a number of them where Jesus talks of himself as bread or the gate or light or the good shepherd, and there are others. If we listen to them, I think there's a connection back to the storytelling way back of Moses on the mountain in Exodus. You might remember there that Moses' attention was caught by a bush that was burning but didn't burn up. And he said to the holy presence there that had gathered his attention and had said to him, "You're going to lead Israel out of slavery." Moses then replies with, "Who is sending me? A name, please. I'd like to know your identity." And instead of a name, he received this: "Who am I? I am who I will be. Tell them I am has sent you." And I have a picture of Moses kind of scratching his head and saying, "Right, yeah, okay. Anything else?" Moses goes away no wiser to the name of the holy, but much wiser as to the character. The character is love that has heard the cries of the people and will bring delivery from their struggles. And he has to be content with that, because that's the limit to what he can experience. And as he goes away, it's the experience of God's presence that transforms him into a leader. And like many others in his tradition, Moses becomes very wary of trying to name. In fact, he refused to name the divine presence. We might say they use things like the Lord or Adonai or Yahweh, but not as a name, as a symbol. And that's an incredibly important part of the way of Jesus' people, the people of Jewishness. My goodness, that's a mess, isn't it? The Jewish people. They name their experience of the holy, but they recognise and honour that the holy presence and name is beyond anything they can understand or grasp. And so it is with Jesus and with those who tell his stories, remembering that they are faithful Jews. And so instead of a label, John's Jesus gives his readers an image to ponder. An image which opens up possibility rather than defining it or naming it or limiting it. Names are important, but they have limitations. Names have meaning, they have strength, they can make us fit in and be included or not. So there's that sense in which we know how names and labels are used to describe people, which can be helpful, but it's also very limiting. Once we think we can define someone or create a label for them, we limit the relationship with them to grow. And in the extreme of that, they become for us or against us, depending on the name and the label we give them. And it seems to me that the gospel stories, and where this comes together for me, and I hope for you as you listen, is that in John in particular, but the gospel stories in general, point us to a different way in their telling of Jesus' story. John the disciple, the storyteller, is keen to identify Jesus with the God of Israel, but does so in a way which defies simple doctrinal statements. He could have had Jesus say, for instance, "Look, folks, I'm the Messiah, okay? Move on. Listen to me." Nice and simple. Except for the misunderstandings and preconceptions that surrounded that name, and what people then and perhaps now thought that the chosen one of God should be all about. The stories and imagery in John instead call people to see or imagine the Messiah and Yahweh, the Lord, the holiness, differently. And thus to also imagine the possibilities for the world transformed by those who follow Messiah's way. Far from the triumphalist images which surrounded Moses for many in Jesus' day, and often do today still, the I am images in John's Gospel call disciples and followers of Jesus into deeper and more creative imagination and respond. The vine? What do you mean? Is a really helpful starting point, I think, to think through and to sit with some of our experience. It's deeply relational. It's not sort of, yes, the Messiah or the great one is up there and we're down here and he's great and we're worms and all of that sort of stuff. It's relational, and it speaks of life-giving energy and connection which flows from the life of the vine into the branches to bear fruit. It speaks of the attentiveness of the gardener, doing what is best for the vine so that it might continue to be powerful, might continue to be fruitful. And when we remember that this is Jesus talking, according to John, on the last night of his life and trying to help his disciples be faithful to what comes next, it's a really important image. Yes, it speaks of the branches that don't bear fruit being cast aside. And that's about the good of the whole plant. The gospel is not an individual thing. And many have come to equate that sort of idea with divine judgment. But I don't know of any gardeners who define pruning and bonfires as punishment. I don't know that we have to see God in those terms. The vine, the whole vine's purpose is to be life-giving, to create fruit. I wonder if we can imagine ourselves into that upper room on the last night of Jesus' life, the setting of John's Gospel for this passage. Can we imagine how Jesus' friends might have heard it? How they might remember it? Clearly they did remember it, because it was told often enough to be preserved in a written gospel decades later. And as we sit with what it might have been for them, can we sit with it as an image and let it speak to us today? What fruit might it bear in us? Blessings.